I'm here today because I share something with all of you. And I lost two of my children, their mother, Jeannie. I'd asked her to stand up, but she's crippled. Don't laugh, Jeannie. Wave. Billy and Carol were two great people. I had 5 children, Jeannie and I, a son and 4 daughters. Carol was the youngest. Billy died when he was 21 while he was scuba diving in Maine in the east. Carol died of a heart attack, probably caused by taking natural foods. And all I remember is crying on the spur of the moment, maybe 100, maybe 1,000 times. But then, after I stop crying each time, I go on and do my work as a lawyer or as a father to the other children or as a husband to my wife and get going. And then I look, as mayor, I met too many people who had lost their only child, sometimes through murder. And I say, at least Jeannie and I had the duty and the privilege of raising 3 daughters. And we couldn't quit, and we didn't quit. Today, I have the great honor of introducing the founder of GriefHaven, Susan Whitmore. I met Susan at my house when they shot a film about GriefHaven when it was first getting started. And I was impressed with her then, and I'm impressed with her now. So my love to all of you, and it's my honor to introduce you, Susan Whitmore.
Hi, everyone. Wow. I look out over these sea of faces, and I'm so grateful. I was writing an email to a friend yesterday, one of the friends of GriefHaven, and I was telling her how one of the frustrating things for me is I feel like I could never give back equal to what I get from all of you. And there's a part of me that wants to. And yet I know there are no words that are enough. There's no gift that's enough. So I hope that just helping other people all over the world who know the terrible gut-wrenching pain of losing a child, siblings losing their brothers and sisters, and then watching their families going through such turmoil, often too young to even understand what's happening. We call them the forgotten ones. People think kids are so resilient, they'll get over it. Well, today you're going to hear from someone who was only 6 when she lost her cousin. And today, the impact it still has on all of their lives. And their spouses, losing a spouse, losing a parent, losing a best friend, losing a pet. I mean, we put our dog to sleep, Brandy, and I cried for weeks. I literally had to see a therapist. After we put our dog to sleep and before Erica passed away, she said, "Mommy, I saw how you were with Brandy. I'm your daughter. I'm really worried about you." I started GriefHaven for 2 reasons. The first one is that before Erica died, a couple of days before she actually died, she said to me, "Mom, I haven't done anything with my life. I'm only 32 years old. No one's going to remember me except you." And I said, "I'll make sure no one ever forgets you." And she said that would mean a lot to me. And I thought it would be, my family, people like that. Combine that with the fact that 2 months after she died, And my daughter Erica, for those of you who don't know, was 32 years old, and she died from an extremely rare sinus cancer. In fact, at the time, we found out when she was first diagnosed that there were only 176 diagnosed cases in the world. That's not good when you hear that. So the second reason is that 2 months after she died, I was crying myself to sleep yet again. And I don't know why it hit me the way it did, but all of a sudden I thought, there are people all over the world right now feeling exactly how I'm feeling, and they don't have anywhere to go either. And that's when I said, by God, I'm going to do something about this. And literally, that's how it started. And today, look where we are. Boy. You know, when the Lux first opened, I was driving down Sunset with my beloved husband, Wendell, and I said to him, oh, that hotel's so beautiful. Do you think we could ever afford to have an event there one day? And he said, I don't think so. Here we are. There's a couple people I need to thank before I introduce our next speaker. These women from Friends of GriefHaven, how can I ever explain to you what they're like? Those of you in here who know them, you know. Every month, they put aside 2 hours of their day, and we sit down at a restaurant, and we have a meeting. Well, now we're having the meetings at Beth's house, and if that isn't enough, she feeds us as well. Every month, for 2 hours, Beth does an agenda, and then she does minutes, and she mails them out to everyone. And we work on this event, and we work on all their incredible creative ideas. And I want to thank each one of them. And you guys, I know you hate this, but you have to stand up. Please, Friends of GriefHaven, please. Stay standing. Nicole Foose, Linda Rosen, Pam Solomon, okay, see, Wendy, Beth, Pam, Melanie, and Robin. Thank you. There's 3 other people I want to thank today. 3 amazing women who have all lost a child and who came through our grief groups and said, I want to do what you do. I want to help other people. And now they co-facilitate with me. And they weren't expecting this. Ann Roberts, where are you? Stand up. Sharon Lusk. Where's Sharon? There's Ann. And Denise Mandel Becker. Thank you all. Okay. The first person you're going to hear from today, her name is Mary McGinn. She's an amazing woman who lost her beautiful daughter, Molly. And that's how we met. And I asked her if she would speak with you today and tell you her story about how she came to GriefHaven, about Molly, and why she's here. Everybody, meet Mary, Molly's mom.
Hi, everyone. So as Susan said, my name is Mary, and I'm Molly's mom. My husband Ruben was called away today on work, and so unfortunately he can't join us, but his thoughts are with us. And I must say it's really quite incredible to look out amongst a room full of people who understand the loss of a child and who have experienced the intricacies and the anguish, and also to see everyone who hasn't lost a child and who is supporting us and giving us love and support. So thank you for that, and we really need GriefHaven, and we're very appreciative of this. coming up on 2 years ago, my husband and I had a very blessed life, a beautiful daughter, joyful parents of a perfect daughter we named Molly. She had never been sick until about 21 months. She got something that the doctors at first thought was the flu. Turns out it was something more serious, and it soon became septic. And in 3 short days, all the best doctors and what we believed was a really good hospital, one of the best hospitals, could not save her little life. The unimaginable happened, and our life turned quickly into a nightmare, which it continues at times. And I really don't want to go on too much more, as we all have had experience with this feeling, and we also know that words fail to really touch what's really happening. But I did a lot of dwelling, and I did a lot of what ifs, and what could have changed, what could have been different, what could I have done, what could have everyone have done. I realized that those questions are really not answerable and not helpful. So the next question was, how do I go on and go forward and live out a life that was meaningful and maybe someday joyful? And this is where Susan and GriefHaven stepped in and really helped us with going forward from here, because really it's the only choice. In the very first few days, shock made everything very blurry, but Susan had so many helpful things to say to us. And despite what she said, just more than that, rather, was here's a woman who had gone through what I was going through and had come out and had gotten to the other side, and was not only functioning and surviving, but was doing amazing things with her life, and that gave me a huge deal of hope. And I just really thought one of these days I got this small glimmer of hope, this vague feeling that these people have done it, Susan has done it, and maybe I can as well. So another way that GriefHaven has really helped is with education. And we all know that we live in a society that doesn't really always know what to do with child loss, what to say, what's appropriate, what's even helpful, and what is empty misnomers and empty phrases. And the friends and family that helped me the most were guided by Susan and by GriefHaven. And so for that, I'm very thankful. We also, of course, became very isolated, as many of you know. Grief can make you really question your identity, your part in your community, and just having people around you that understand. So GriefHaven became our community, our new community of people who understood and supported. So as I waited through this first year of grief, and I realized that somehow life does go on, I was torn between days of wanting nothing more than just to lay on the couch, and also I wanted to fill up the rest of my days with an amazing, meaningful, and full life. So going back and forth between the two feelings was a little crazy, but eventually I did get up off the couch, and at first it was just to go to the meetings with Susan and GriefHaven, and eventually I realized that the most important thing that Susan really helped with is an example of how she and others at GriefHaven, how many lives they touched and how much hope they gave. And it's really helped me to see what I could do, maybe to find more meaning in my life and to help others and to honor Molly. I'll never forget one day speaking with Susan. We were talking about just the age-old question of what is the meaning of life, especially in a world that's so random and at times unfair and messy. Susan said maybe it's simply just to grow our souls. And I really like that. I wholeheartedly agree, for Molly's sake as well as for my own. The grief it'll never leave us, it'll change. And thank you for GriefHaven for really providing us a haven and for hope. And my husband Reuben and I are eternally grateful. We cannot imagine where our lives would be without GriefHaven and you, Susan. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Molly's mom. Jessica Weinstock was only 6 when her cousin Jared Becker died suddenly and completely unexpectedly. His parents, Denise and Stephen, sitting over there, along with Jared's brother Max and sister Rachel, were now beginning that terrible journey of trying to figure out what happened, what to do next, and how they could possibly go on without Jared. Flash forward 10 years later, Jessica is now beautiful and 16, and she was told to write a personal essay in school. The impact of a child's death affects even the youngest ones. Here is Jessica's story.
Hello everyone, I'm Jessica Weinstock, and I just wanted to thank Susan for giving me this opportunity and including me in this. I'm 6 years old. I just came home from school a couple hours ago, and I'm with my dad, sister, and brother. My dad calls us into the den, and he says we have to talk. Usually when my parents say that, it's pretty scary, because what if I'm in trouble? Then my dad says someone in our family is in the hospital, and we are not sure if they're going to make it. My mommy is dying. That is the first thing that I think of. The 3 of us start crying because we're all thinking the same thing. Where is our mom? Daddy tells us that it is not our mom in the hospital, but my 1-year-old cousin Jared. My dad tries to explain to us what being on life support means, but I do not understand. How can you be alive but actually dead at the same time? What does it mean for someone to die? Am I ever going to see him again? I have no idea what death means because I've never experienced a death in my life, but this is my first. It's been a couple days now and we're getting ready for a funeral. I don't even know what that word means, but everybody's wearing black and everybody is sad. My mommy never smiles anymore. We all have to sit down now and I'm afraid to ask questions. Everybody cries all the time. It makes me sad that everybody is sad and I still don't understand where my baby cousin is. We're all quiet now and all these grown-ups are talking with really big words that I don't understand. Then these people start to lower a big, huge box into the ground and everyone has flowers. There's a huge mountain of dirt and everyone is standing around it. Then my mom says it's time to go, so we go to Grandma and Grandpa's house. We come back a few days later and there is no more dirt, but a small piece of paper in a green frame that has plastic over it. I ask my mommy what it is, and she says it's a temporary gravestone. Then she shows me my great-grandparents' gravestones and tells me that Gerald's will look like that in a year. Every night we go to my grandparents' house, and everybody is still wearing black. All my aunts and uncles don't even talk anymore. I'm starting to understand that I will never see Jared again. But where is he? June 16th, 2014 will be the 10-year mark of my cousin's death. Sometimes it takes years to process death. Sometimes it takes decades, and sometimes it takes a lifetime. Now that I'm 16, I still can't say that I understand more than I did as a 6-year-old child. A lot has happened these past 10 years. My aunt just recently started to wear colors again. Every year we go to his grave for his birthday and celebrate his life with freshly hatched butterflies, balloons, and birthday cake. 10 years later, a picture of Jared still sits at every Jewish holiday dinner. His mom puts a picture of him in a frame that looks like a chair, and he's right there with us. This tragedy definitely made me realize how much it truly robbed my whole family of pure happiness. I learned about love and pain, and how deeply they affect us, motivate us, abuse us, and change us. I've never expressed my feelings about this horrible experience. So taking on this essay puts me in a place of pain, but also helps me to realize that I'm honoring him in a way that I've never been able to before. There's this hole that I feel in my heart and a deep sadness because something was taken from me and from the people that I love. There's this emptiness that can never be filled. When I think of him or when I see pictures of him, it reassures me that he's an epitome of an angel. His existence represented happiness, positivity, and pureness, and the reason why he is a real angel is because you cannot get that with anyone else. I may never have the experience of having someone in my life that is as innocent and wonderful as Jared was, because there's nothing bad to say, nothing bad to think, and nothing bad to feel. Instead of being in a state of having to grieve over him, I'm left with this feeling of him. The feeling that everything is just good, and it's as simple as that. Thank you.
So the reason that we decided to have you hear from people directly who are impacted by what we do is because it's so much better to hear from them than it is for us to stand up here and talk about it. What I want to do now is, one thing I forgot, and it's really bothering me, is to acknowledge the grandparents in the room. That is a difficult loss. So, my love to all of you who have not only lost a grandchild, but you're also watching your own children suffer in a way that you know you can't make it better, except all you can do is love them through it. All right, next on the agenda. I see a grandmother crying. Oh. When I decided to start GriefHaven, several miracles, and I swear to you, they were just incredible, the things that fell into place to make it happen. The first thing that happened was I met a celebrity who was not known at all in the United States, and I helped her play the role of a movie where it was her first big blockbuster. She was going to be playing the role of a mother who loses both of her children and her husband in a freak accident. And so she was researching, and I helped her play that role. And in order to thank me, she helped me do the documentary film that Mr. Reardon was talking about earlier called Portraits of Hope, The Parent's Journey. The one we're working on now is Portraits of Hope, The Sibling's Journey. When I wanted to do that documentary, I thought, I need to call this guy in Northern California. I need to get him on this documentary. So I picked up the phone and I called Mark Klass. Now most of you probably remember who Mark Klass is. We all know Polly Klass, don't we? Polly Klass, who lived in Petaluma and was abducted from her slumber party by a pedophile. And for 3 months, they looked for her and couldn't find her. Mark has gone on to do, and Violet, his beautiful wife, has gone on to do the most incredible things with his life. And it is my humbling honor to introduce to you my friend and Polly's dad, Mark Klass.
I can't believe I'm doing this off of a notebook. If I just freeze up here at some point, it's not me, it's this. At least I hope that's how it is. Before we started, I actually was talking to some folks that I haven't seen for many, many years. One of those folks, Ann Roberts, and I were reminiscing about the beginnings of GriefHaven and when we all got together and how difficult all of our lives were. And she mentioned that, here we are, 12, 13, 14 years later, and not only are we getting on with our lives, but we're thriving. And I just want to thank all of you for helping me to thrive. Like so many of you, yeah, we all deserve a big hand. Like so many of you, my relationship with grief is as powerful as it is personal. Late in the evening of October 1st, 1993, my 12-year-old daughter, Polly, the love of my life, was kidnapped from a slumber party in the home that she shared with her mom in Petaluma, California. Whenever I reflect on this dark time in my life, it's with a confusion of images and emotions, because those 2 months were dominated by turbocharged states of fear, anxiety, and anger. Not scary movie fear that subsides after 2 hours. Instead, a tsunami of unrelenting emotion that causes perpetual sweat, takes you to the edge, and hurls you into the abyss. And I know that others here know what I'm talking about. It was the kind of anxiety that nearly paralyzed me, making it almost impossible for me to eat and sleep. I was angry at my inability to get a grip on the situation. I was angry at the police for not finding Polly. And I was angry at God for allowing her to be touched by evil. I was in the midst of a Category 5 tornado that I was unable to control and that offered no respite. 65 days after that ordeal began, I was summoned to the Petaluma Police Department. By the time I arrived in the chief's office, Polly's mom was already there, sitting with her face in her hands, crying softly. The 2 police officers that were in the room with us, and there were only the 4 of us, had tears in their eyes as well. They were sorry to inform me that the kidnapper, who had been found a couple of days earlier, had confessed and had led them to the garbage pile near a rural highway off-ramp where he had discarded our child. They recommended that we not view Polly's remains, but instead remember her as she was in life. You know, I heard his words, but they hadn't yet pierced my heart. I asked if we could tell our families before the news broke, and they agreed. So within 15 minutes, the police station was filled with Eve's relatives, with my relatives, and everybody was sobbing. The grief was palpable. It was everywhere. But still, I wasn't crying. I then asked if we could contact the volunteers, because so many people had helped us for 65 days to search for Polly, and they said, sure, do that. So I called over to the volunteer center and I said, look, it's coming up in just a few minutes that Polly's been found and that Polly's not dead and that Polly will not be joining us in celebration ever again. And I could hear the room deflating. It was only across the street, but I could almost physically hear it deflating as people dealt with their own emotions during that time. Still, I could not cry. I could not emote. I could not do anything. So we then got into our vehicles. And for the first time in over 2 months, we drove from Petaluma, California, back to Sausalito, California, which is where I live. And we drove in a slow caravan. Obviously, there wasn't a lot said. The little street that we lived on was covered in winter leaves. And as I walked through our front door, I remember thinking how beautiful those leaves look in death. Somebody lit a fireplace, and my wife Violet and I, drained from 2 months of futile battle, lay down in front of the fireplace. And only then did my emotions fully engage. The rumble began in my core, but it quickly found a primal voice. I jumped to my feet, blinded by tears, a banshee scream escaping from my torched soul. I would have destroyed my home had the men in the room not held me and contained the explosion of my broken heart. Finally, the wire had snapped and I had plummeted into the bottom of the abyss without a net to break my fall. I had hung my hope on the illusion that hard work would allow me to snatch life from the clutches of death. But death is irreversible and it is indisputable. It took a 65-day high-velocity descent to learn that the reality of death exists in its finality. When I hit bottom, I shattered like glass, and shattered glass cannot be easily reassembled. We all know that. Even if you manage to precisely fuse the shards, the best you can hope for is a bizarre mosaic of refracting light that bears little resemblance to the original. Instead of strength, you have fragility. Instead of clarity, you have mirrors of illusion. I had been thrust into the throes of full-blown, unmitigated grief. My perfect world was gone, and I had never felt so alone in my entire life. Polly was dead, and the only thing I wanted to do at that moment, during that time, was to join her wherever she might have been. Instead, I was trapped in the purgatory of life with few options, no hope, and what seemed like nothing to live for. I had confusion when I needed clarity. I had isolation when I needed fellowship. I had grief when I needed GriefHaven. Unfortunately, because it did not yet exist, I was unable to access the one resource that I now share with other parents who are struggling to live without a beloved child, with full knowledge that their path will be easier than mine was, because Susan Whitmore, I'm sorry, Susan, is there to show them the way back into the light. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many worthy causes. I know because I'm involved in one. Our speaker in a few minutes knows because she's involved in them as well. But none of them do what GriefHaven does. Many of those causes work to prevent tragedy through education, research, or some combination of action and advocacy. Unfortunately, those solutions don't always work, and that's where GriefHaven comes in. Again, nobody else does what GriefHaven does, and so many people need their help. And this is the big ask. I'm asking you to reach into your pockets and to write a check for GriefHaven. If you've done that, reach back in and write another check for GriefHaven. You can donate to general operating expenses, or you can donate to some of the projects they have upcoming. I know Susan's already mentioned this to other people, but those projects include Portraits of Hope, The Sibling's Journey. All those kids that are forgotten so often when somebody dies, the other child. She needs 10 grand for that. That's a modest amount of money. Updating the GriefHaven website to a 21st century format is a very important thing because everybody connects online. Everybody goes to, at least all of us, I'm sure, go to Facebook, but that's only a page. We need more depth, and GriefHaven offers that depth on their website. I was talking to somebody earlier, and they said, you know, when I was grieving my father, I didn't want to go and join a group. I didn't want to be with a lot of other people. Well, with GriefHaven, you don't have to do that. With GriefHaven, you can go onto the website, you can go onto the forums, you can be as public or as anonymous as you want to be. These are the kinds of services that you're not going to find anywhere else. And again, if you look around this room, if you listen to the beautiful women that spoke before me, or the mayor, we're all here and thriving now in part because GriefHaven came to our rescue and helped us to redeem our lives. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you to dig deep. If you have already donated, dig a little deeper and donate some more. Nobody does what GriefHaven does, and so many people need that help. Thank you. And now for something completely different. Even in the early days, we were determined that Polly's tragedy had a greater purpose than an evening's entertainment. So, as a family, we rejected book deals, we rejected TV, movies, and other forms of edutainment. Instead, we pursued a life of advocacy. We calculated, we being my wife Violet and I, calculated that we had about a 90-day window of opportunity in which to achieve any cause-related goals. Because we figured after that, there would be another crime, there would be another flash that would reach the headlines, that would capture people's attention, and that our cause would be forgotten, our child would be forgotten, and most assuredly, we would be forgotten as well. And sure enough, 6 months later, June 12th, 1994, O.J. Simpson murdered his ex-wife Nicole and her friend Ron Goldman, and the news cycle exploded like a supernova. We couldn't get enough, or a lot of people couldn't get enough. From the mind-boggling nature of the charges, to the low-speed chase, to the endless speculation, the dream team, and finally the trial of the century had us transfixed. And in the middle of all of the madness, all the breathless commentary, the speculation, and the bloviating stood Ron Goldman's sister Kim, quiet and observant, almost always by her father's side. She radiated dignity amidst the madness and calm through the chaos. Her words were few and far between, but we could see the pain in her eyes and we could see the grief in her soul. She became the moral compass who stood her ground against an act of unimaginable immorality and crime and depravity. She sought truth when so many others sought entertainment. You know, there are certain events that we remember with absolute precision. The assassination of President Kennedy, the assassination of his brother, the assassination of Martin Luther King come to my mind. The 49ers' first Super Bowl win comes to my mind. The reading of the verdict in the O.J. Simpson trial was another such situation. I was at a luncheon just like this in Odessa, Texas. Everybody'd been waiting for the news. Nobody was prepared for that thing to have come back as quickly as it did. So we stood there transfixed with a little television up on the stage, and they were little in those days. Even if they were big, they were little. And we watched in awe. And interestingly enough, in that particular situation, the entire audience was white and all of the servers were black. It doesn't get much more awkward than that. As the verdict was read, we sat transfixed as the smirking killer and his team of miscreants savored their sweet moment. Then the camera panned to Fred Goldman and his daughter Kim. There are no words to describe the pain and betrayal I saw in their eyes. It was a moment that could have defeated a lesser person. Instead of retreating to lick her wounds, though, Kim Goldman has become a fierce writer, a teacher, a speaker, and an advocate for victims' rights. She does not back down, she does not retreat, and she does not second guess. Instead, she stands her ground. I like to think that we share those qualities. Who knows? But there's one more commonality between us, and it is one that I respect almost above all others. Like me, Kim does not forgive. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce my new friend and our guest speaker for this afternoon, Kim Goldman.
So I guess it's a sign of the times when Jessica has a printed speech and Mark and I have our handy. I'm reaching the right technology unit here. My printer did not work this morning, so I apologize for that. Thank you, Mark. That was poetic and lovely and thoughtful. First, let me say thank you for all of you coming today. Thank you, Susan, for inviting me into your world and into your beautiful process with which you get to give back to all these amazing people in honor of Erica. I'm humbled, as always, when I am asked to speak, but I never want to turn away an opportunity because I get to talk about my brother and my family and our struggles and our hope and our process and our journey and all those great words that we're all taught so many times over. I usually try to prepare something, but as I said to Susan, I'm much more comfortable kind of speaking extemporaneously. So with that being said, that also means that I'm kind of all over the place sometimes. So I apologize. Sometimes I swear, and yes, my son is here and he's heard it all. I am a trucker at heart, so sweetie, I apologize in advance. I get very emotional. I woke up this morning to an article that was sent to me that there's a new television series coming on FX that features our story. It's a 10-episode, yeah. So coming here today, I'm grappling with why on earth do we need to see another 10 episodes of what we all watched for so long, but that is coming soon to a television network near you. But what it reminded me of this morning was how prevalent it still remains in our society today that the killer commanded such attention when he took my brother's life and Nicole's 20 years ago. And it angered me at first because I'm so sick of hearing about him. But that opportunity allows me the chance to come and talk to you again and remind you what this is all about, and that's about Nicole and Ron, so he can go F himself. Excuse me, honey, that was me saying. Because all of the attention that he's been able to command for the last 20 years only gives a bigger platform for my father and I to speak about the things that we hold near and dear to us, and that's Ron's memory, Nicole's memory, our seeking for justice, the rough road when it comes to grief and loss. So I'm grateful for that in a weird twist of fate. I feel honored to have these opportunities because the intimate loss of my brother's and Nicole's life became so public, and you all got to share in something that most of us would prefer to hold very private, and I know you all can understand that. On June 13th at 6:20, I received that frantic phone call from my father telling me that my brother had died. And when I heard the word died, I assumed car accident for some reason, because what else would you think? And he said, "Have you heard the news today?" "No, I don't know what you're talking about." "Have you heard the news? Did you hear about Nicole Brown Simpson?" "No, I don't know what you're talking about." "Do you know who O.J. Simpson is?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about?" And he said, Ron died. And all I remember is dropping to the floor, the phone next to me, and thinking, oh my God, I have to go to a funeral. Do I have to go to a funeral? I've never been to a funeral before. I had no idea what that meant. I got back on the phone with my dad, and he said to me, "I need you to pack, thank you. I need you to pack a bag, and I need you to get home." Joe, my boyfriend at the time, had already booked flights for us to come home. In those moments, everything had changed, as you all have experienced. It only takes a nanosecond for you to realize that you have just been transcended to a whole other place that you never thought you would ever be. And I didn't know what was ahead for us. And in that moment, all I could think about was wanting to be with my dad. It's only a 45-minute flight from San Francisco, where I was living at the time, down to Los Angeles. And it was at that time, back before the 9/11 attacks, when you could actually come and meet your families at the gate when they got off the plane. And my dad at that time warned me that he wasn't going to be able to pick me up because we had a house full of people and he needed to stay close in case anyone from the Los Angeles Police Department would be kind enough to give us any information, because at that point they hadn't told us anything. Sorry, Mayor, I know you were mayor at the time, but poor Claudia Radcliffe. Claudia Radcliffe, she gets sold out every time I speak. She was the coroner at the time, my brother's deaf, and she's the one who made that lovely call to us. My dad received the call at 5:30 on that day, and Claudia got on the phone and said, "Have you been watching the news?" And my dad had been listening to the news all day. He was a salesman at the time, and he was in his car all day driving up and down the Southern California, and had been listening to Nicole Brown and a friend who was found in Brentwood. And he had been listening all day to O.J. Simpson, Nicole Simpson, and the friend, never thinking, obviously, that it would be his son. So Claudia Radcliffe was the one who gave my father that lovely news. We didn't have anybody show up at our door like you see on television. We didn't have the benefit of the LAPD coming to our house like they did for the Brown family, and no disrespect to them, but why didn't we have that same courtesy afforded to us? We waited all day for a notification to happen, and within about 35 seconds, my brother's face was plastered all over the news. I was fortunate to not have seen it that way, but it was a good hour and 20 minutes before, like I said, my dad called me. But anyway, jumping ahead, this is where my brain goes. I got off the flight when I came down to Los Angeles, and walked off the walkway and saw my father, who at that point had already become a shell of a man. And I know we talk a lot about the loss of a child, but watching your parent sort of die right in front of you is also really hard. I became the strong one, I became the rock, and I became the one that my father leaned on because he didn't have the strength. We got in the car, and the radio was on. It was KFI. And it was the first time that I heard that Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were found slaughtered to death in Brentwood, California. Very quickly, someone turned the station off. But I will never, ever forget. A couple days later, when we had to go to the mortuary and pick out my brother's casket, because that's something you do every day, my father just sat in the chair bobbing back and forth. It should be me, it should be me, it should be me. And while he did that, I picked out the casket, I picked out the flowers. I had to make the decision on how to bury my brother. The Jewish religion, you don't embalm, but we really wanted my brother to be buried with some integrity and some dignity. And we wanted him buried in a suit, and they told us that they needed to take special measures to make sure that he was buried properly because he was so cut up. And they had to face him a certain way so that we didn't see the gaping gash in his neck. My brother died of 5 fatal wounds. Nicole, as you know, was nearly decapitated. People don't like to talk about that because it's uncomfortable. I like to constantly remind you of the brutality that happened that night because it was a vicious, violent attack that took the lives of 2 people that had thriving lives. And on the night that Nicole and Ron died, the list of victims grew, and it continued to grow as people became more connected and learned about our story as it unfolded on television, and we got to open up our hearts and stay connected to other people. So the list just kept growing and growing, and as you moved through that trial, it opened up such a Pandora's box of domestic violence and grief and loss and so much trauma and tragedy in our world. I want to digress for a second because I wanted to read something to you that I think explains a little bit. As Mark mentioned, I'm not a big believer in forgiveness, and I recently wrote a book that's entitled Can't Forgive, and I'm going to try to open it and read just an excerpt. So excuse me. Cancel. Okay. So pardon me while I read quickly. Other than the occasionally watching Law and Order on LA Law, I had absolutely no idea what to expect when it came to the judicial process. I'd never been inside a courtroom before. I was immediately immersed in the ecosystem of lawyers, police officers, detectives, investigators, journalists, reporters, and yes, there is a difference, victims, celebrities, and the public. I was only 22 years old when I got dumped into this unpredictable, foreign, and confusing world that became my new existence. I would depend on the legal system for safety, rely on it for safe, and rebel against it out of fear. I didn't quite understand at the time how far-reaching the case was and would continue to be. I never quite grasped the impact it had on those around me, as well as complete strangers across the globe. The trial was so personal, so intimate, and so emotional to me that it never occurred to me how it was affecting others. When I chose to focus on the criminal trial as a regular court attendee and put everything else aside everything else in my college life, my face was regularly videotaped and photographed. I became the poster child of misery, a portrait of unbridled sorrow and grief. It was a catapult into fame and notoriety I never bargained for. That wasn't something I ever courted or sought. I understood the desire for fame, but achieving it as a victim of one of the country's most polarizing figures wasn't the way to become famous, I can assure you. We considered ourselves a healthy, dysfunctional family, but all the hoopla generated by this case was horribly unnerving. For reasons I will never totally comprehend, people were completely obsessed with the case. Perhaps it was the first time a celebrity was accused of such a heinous crime, or because we had only just gotten over the Rodney King beatings in Los Angeles, or perhaps because it involved pretty people. Sad to say, but crimes always get more attention when the victims are good looking. But whatever it was, people couldn't stop talking about the trial. It was the topic of every table in busy restaurants, the lead-in for every late-night talk show, the first 7 minutes of every broadcast news, and the cover of most of the rag magazines. But it was also just my life. Living the trial of the century, which a phrase I vehemently hate, was incredibly lonely, despite the hordes of people who attached themselves to the case and to my brother. We were inundated with letters of support, gifts, financial contributions for the civil case we filed after the criminal trial, poems, artwork, a few death threats, a stalker or two, and notes informing us that don't be alarmed, but we've left a bomb in your backyard. Who doesn't love a bomb squad descending onto your property on a lovely Saturday afternoon? Every conversation was about the case. No matter who we came in contact with, that was all they wanted to talk about. The mailman, the grocery store clerk, the neighbor, the long-lost friend, or the valet. Every thought, every question, every piece of commentary, from their inquisitive minds to my numb brain. I started to shut down, becoming far more introverted than ever before. I could never find the right words to say or the energy to engage in every conversation, so I let people talk at me and around me. I was definitely opinionated and would take part in most discussions if someone had the evidence wrong or was repeating false information. But at any given moment, I was on the verge of tears, and so numb I was almost paralyzed. I never got a break from my grief and my anger. We lived it, breathed it, slept it, and had zero reprieve. Even though we received feedback that was often kind, loving, and supportive, I hated all the attention. While I got to share the two most amazing men in my life, my brother and my dad, I wish sometimes they would have all gone away so that I could just mourn in peace. But if they had all completely disappeared, I would have been left alone in my darkness, and I'm not sure which would have been better. I never attended grief counseling. I tried therapy a few times, and I went to one support group, but I wasn't in a frame of mind to continue past those few feeble attempts at healing. I didn't want to be told what I was feeling was normal. I wasn't interested in the stages of grief, and I most assuredly wasn't going to go down the road of survivor's guilt. In group settings, people gawked at me. I didn't feel safe to share my intimate emotions for fear they would end up in the National Enquirer. How could I have such an aversion to psychology in a time of crisis, considering that was my life's dream to be a psychologist? Going to court every day was my job. However, it came with no pay, no benefits, no health insurance, and no long-term security. It actually had all the opposite effects. Loss of wages because I depleted my savings account, severe emotional stress, and a derailment of my career goals. But I stayed at it day after day, tolerating enormous amounts of anguish, sorrow, fear, and anger. I always felt that for whatever I endured now would never be as excruciating as the 5 fatal stab wounds to his neck, chest, and stomach that my brother received as he watched his killer walk away. Ron and I always had a promise to be there for one another, and I was determined to hold up my end of the bargain. I still feel today that there's nothing that I can endure would ever be as much as what Nicole and Ron went through that life. So my father and I have opted to take our journey and come and bring and share. We just came off of a Jewish holiday, which is all about forgiveness, right? Yom Kippur. And I spoke at the temple and I was questioned about why I just can't find it in my heart to forgive. And why can't you just let it go? Why can't you just find closure? And I don't know about you, but I really, like nails on chalkboard, whenever people talk to me about closure and forgiveness. And if you could just find forgiveness, you'd be much happier. I'm doing okay. I have appropriate anger. I have appropriate grief. I have appropriate emotions that are attached to dealing with a loss. I don't know any other way to do it other than what I'm doing. And when people talk to me about if I could just forgive, I could live a happier life, I could live a lighter life, I could live with less anger in my life. And I get frustrated because for all those people that want to tell me how to do it, I wish they would ask me how I am. And ask me, hey, how do you manage to get up every day? Because sometimes I'm not really sure how I manage to get up every day, but I have a beautiful 11-year-old son that I need to make a difference in this world for. I have a father that still relies on me. I have students that I counsel on a day-to-day basis and I need to show up for. And I have myself that I need to be accountable to. People always talk about, if you wouldn't speak so much and you write these books and it's all about you and Ron wouldn't want it this way. Well, you know what? My brother and I never had a conversation about how we would live our life if one of us were to happen to be murdered. So I'm doing the best I can to live my best life. And so when you sent me the invitation for today and it said live your best life, I kind of felt like that's what I'm doing. And some days I suck at it, and some days I'm a great champion, and some days I just kind of find my way fumbling through it. But it's my life. And I can look at myself in the mirror and I can be proud of who I am and the woman that I've become. And I can also give myself permission to fall apart every once in a while because that's what happens. I wrote that I reject stages of grief, and I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but I just don't think it works so methodically and so perfectly. And if I put it into that little box and I try to compartmentalize it, I'm gonna crumble there. So I give myself permission to just live my life the way that I'm living it, and do the best that I can, and ask for support and ask for help. I'm still not really good at the support group situation, even though I lead them, I understand the benefit. But it just doesn't work for me. But that's okay for me because I find other ways. I have beautiful friends, I have a great family, I have a fantastic therapist, I had a victim advocate who showed up to court every single day with me. I had Marcia and Chris, the DAs, that despite all of the crap that they got handed on television, they were fantastic for me. Tom Lang and Phil Van Adder, despite the fact they didn't show up at my door, they ended up being amazing friends. So even though I dumped on the LAPD, they ended up being fantastic resources for us. So I looked elsewhere, but that's what works for me. And so part of what I wanted to talk about today was just giving each other permission to just be who you are and live your grief the way that you need to live it. Because unless you've walked in our shoes, and it doesn't have to be the loss of a parent, a child, because I had asked Susan if I was going to be isolating anybody if I spoke about my brother's murder. But at the end of the day, we all share that one common theme, and that's just pain and sadness. And it doesn't matter how it shows up, we all feel it. And I don't want to compare my grief to anybody else's. It really is hard for me when someone says, oh, I just lost my grandmother at 95. It's nothing like what you've dealt with. I don't see it that way. Loss is loss. Your relationships with your family members that you've lost are yours to hold true to your heart, just like I'm going to hold mine. And I'm okay with that, and I invite you too, that when people tell you that you should just let it go or move on and find closure, to just give them the proverbial flip off, because they don't get it. And I thank you for that. So I think, I appreciate this environment because it's safe. When you look out, I really probably didn't have to say anything. I could just come up here and you'd all just go like this, because you just get it. And I feel, and I know Mark, you understand this, that it's you get, with the, who was it? One of the Marx brothers said that, it's the club that you never wanted to belong to, but you're so glad that you're all friends in it. That's kind of how I feel now that I'm so immersed in this world. It's so comforting and so warm and inviting, and I thank you for that, because while you were all dealing with your grief, you in some way extended your arm and your hand to somebody else who was dealing with yours, and we all pay it forward. And that was inspiring and hopeful and motivating for me and my dad, and I know Mark, it's incredibly helpful, and Susan, to be able to get the courage to stand up and talk about your pain and your anguish and be okay in it. And I think, I talk about being a psychologist. The one picture from the time I was 6, that's all I ever wanted to do, which is a little weird, because I never wanted to be a hairdresser or a teacher. I wanted to be a psychologist. Yeah. But the first painting that I bought from my office was that sign, I'm okay, you're okay. Do you guys remember this poster from like the 80s? Yeah, I still have that. But it really meant something to me because it taught me how to have ownership over my life and to be accountable for my choices and to feel comfortable in your own skin. And even though I don't like to show my legs because I don't like what they look like, in my 40s, I've definitely kind of embraced this woman that I am because I've been through a lot, and it isn't just about my brother. There have been lots of things that have happened in my life that have kind of put me in this position to feel good about where I'm at and the choices that I've made and the ability to thrive and live a healthy life, doing it my way with integrity and grace and honor. And that is because my brother died that way. And so part of his legacy was teaching me how to live my life with honor and with selflessness, because what my brother did in the last few minutes of his life was incredibly selfless. And when I got to talk to my son about his Uncle Ron, whom he never got to meet, I got to talk about being a hero. And I got to talk about what it means to give of oneself for somebody else. When my brother showed up to Nicole's house that night, he came across a violent act in progress, and he stepped in to try to stop. He didn't run. And as much as I wished my brother would have been selfish and run for his life, it would not have been him to do that. And so if I lived my life in any other way, I feel like I would be doing a disservice to the way that he died. And so as hard as it is sometimes, my brother made a choice that night, and I'm making the same choice to live my life that way. So again, I don't know if he would wish it for me any other way, but he teaches me something in his death, and I get to now teach that to my son, who I hope I'm imparting some beautiful wisdom and that I'm a good role model for. Excuse me. Part of the reason that I speak about closure is because it's been 20 years since I've touched my brother, that I've given him a hug, that I've heard his voice. I still pick up the phone to want to talk to him. I still live a life that has joy in it, but it's bittersweet because I don't get to share it with him. And I still deal with the grief on different levels every day. And I think that when we get to talk to people about what we experience, that's the biggest message that we send, that it's unpredictable, but it's consistent. I always speak of my grief being consistent like a best friend. It's always there when I need it. I can rely on it 100%. It knows me better than anybody. It's there with me in my darkest hours. I hate them. I love them, but I wouldn't trade it because it's all I know now. And it's my new normal. That phrase used to be cliche, but it really is how I live my life. Everything just looks different. It's a different color lens. Everything kind of comes through this weird lens now that you have like a nanosecond to kind of figure out where it goes and put a smile on your face and keep moving. And every day it's hard, and every day you find the strength and the courage. And I'm proud of that. And as the days, like I said before, that I want to just give up, I was suicidal at some point, I was homicidal at some point, and I found a way to not be, because that's not, first of all, I'd probably be put in jail quicker than the killer was, but if I ever did anything, I'd probably spend more time there. But it's just not, it's not who I am at my core being, but I wanted to honor those feelings, and I wanted to honor how hard it is to be in this role as often as we are for the rest of our lives. So I know I'm going to belabor my point now, but I guess what I wanted to say at the end of the day is just to be true to who you are, be authentic to yourself, and be honest about what you're feeling at any given moment, and just let it be okay. I'm okay, you're okay. That's how we kind of have to move this movement forward. And for all of those people that want to judge us and our process, and that you have other kids you need to focus on, or you have another day ahead of you, be thankful for that. You can also say to them, I just want to be where I am today. I just want to feel this today. Let me have this, and then tomorrow will be another day. And as long as you are reaching out and you're asking for support when you need it, and you know where it's available to you, then that's the best way that you can live your best life. And I think for me, I have been so fortunate to have so many people be in our corner for so long, and sometimes, as I said, how isolating that was. It was also very comforting to know that I had a collective hug around us at any given moment. And as hard as that is now, because sometimes I don't want to talk about it, and some days I can't escape it, it's very comforting to know that people know my brother and they know my dad, and that there are people in this world that are loving and kind and compassionate, even though we hear about all those kooky people on the news all the time. We are a community of people that love and honor each other, and I want to thank you for sharing your stories with Susan and for giving her an opportunity to continue GriefHaven. There are so many of us that will unfortunately lead the path for so many other inevitable victims of loss, and we now get to teach them our best coping skills and abilities to manage and not have closure and not have forgiveness and have that be part of the journey. I know I started to ramble there at the end, and I'm sorry. So I'm going to just say thank you for letting me be here, and thank you for letting me share in your lunch today. Sam, thanks for being a trooper. And thank you, Mayor Reardon, for starting off our event today. I don't know that I have any other final closing thoughts, but my heart is full, and I appreciate the kindness that you've all extended to me and to my father. And ultimately to my brother, because it does make it better and it does make it easier, and just knowing that you have someone to hold your hand and not say anything sometimes is the best gift. So thank you for supporting GriefHaven and Susan today and for me. And I think I'm early, but I'm gonna know when it's time to go.